to screw up and smoke weed with, because today's January 5th. But it's always 420 here. It'll always be 420 here. So I'm hoping that this year is a hell of a lot better than next year. And we'll keep this thing going as much as we can and try to make it entertaining. So, have we ever talked about Blobsploitation? Well, there was a movie back in 1958 called The Blob. I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, though younger fans may be more familiar with the remake, The Blob. I think that was in the 80s. But anyway, of course, this meteorite comes flying down and lands in a wooded area, and of course this old guy's out there, and hey, see a meteorite laying in a fucking hole, poke it with a stick. That's what we're supposed to do, right? And if some huge hunk of snotty looking stuff comes out of the cracked meteor, what do? You poke it with a stick. And then you hold it up and watch it ooze down, and it covers your arm, and there's the whole opening thing with Blob. And the hero of the Blob was played by a teenager, Steve McQueen, who was 28 years old then, world's oldest teenager. But then again, did you ever think those people that were in the beach party movies were in their teens? No, they weren't. That went out later. But anyway, that was 1958. Now, I don't know whether word of them making the Blob reached Japan, but that same year, Toho Studios, the people that gave us Godzilla, released a movie called The H-Man, which was picked up for distribution over here by Columbia Pictures. And for whatever reason, Columbia Pictures sort of tinkered with this thing. I guess they were marketing like horror films to kids or something like that, because there was some kind of promotional gimmick that would involve an H-Man sponge. But then when people started really thinking that what was to stop any of these kids from going into the restrooms and soaking the sponge with water and throw it at the screen, sure, we would have fucking done that. We did shit like that. But the thing was that the H-Man was it's sort of like the Mob versus the Blob. It's the Yazuka. The plot is that there's it's drug dealers and strange shit that happened after an atomic bomb went off. Of course, I saw this on a afternoon showcase called The Big Show that went on about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and every day was a different theme. War movies, gangster movies, horror movies. So, of course, we get this thing, and it opens up where it's pouring rain outside, and as I was watching it, it was raining outside. And this guy's like going to this car after he gets handed off a satchel, which we find out later was full of drugs. All of a sudden, he has this pained look on his face and looks down at his foot and starts shooting for some reason. And all of a sudden, he gets hit by a car, and the cops come, and there's nothing but a suit of empty clothes, a gun, and a bag of drugs. So, okay, now I said it was raining outside. About this point, my mother asked me to take the dog out, and I'm like, no fucking way, I ain't going outside. So, anyway, there's I guess, they didn't say Yazuka right there, but it's the Japanese mob, and they're doing something with drugs, and they're operating out of a nightclub. And there's this singer, Chikara, who was basically involved with the guy who disappeared. And the cops are really rough on her, but then she is visited by another mobster who comes in through an open window on another rainy night, and he wants to know where the money and the drugs are or whatever, and he leaves, and all of a sudden you hear gunshots outside, and she looks outside and sees his clothes laying in the water and the gun laying there. So something got to him too. Now this scientist goes to the police sergeant, and you'd recognize all these people from the Godzilla films, and I'm not going to be stupid enough to tell you I know their names because I don't, but I do know that the guy in the big G suit, Hiro Nakajima, was there also. So this scientist is convinced that there's something going on with these vanishing mobsters. It's more than meets the eye. But his buddy, the sergeant in charge of the operation, doesn't agree with that. So they think this, poor singer has something to do with it. So there's this main mobster, I think his name's Uchida. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but hey, what the hell. And he has the drugs and the money stashed somewhere in the sewer system, but he has to get to them. Now, the scientist has found a guy who was rescued off a freighter, which pretty much everybody aboard the freighter was missing or dead, and this guy has radiation burns. Well, he tells a tale of how his ship found this deserted tanker, and they boarded the tanker, and they were reading the captain's logbook, and weirdly enough, there's like scattered clothing all over the ship, and the captain's clothes are draped over this chair like he was sitting there, and the last entry in the book is gone, but it said something about that they were watching in the area of where there was an atomic test. I think it might have been Bikini Atoll or whatever, I don't really know, and that 6 crewmen standing on the bow of the ship during the blast just vanished. And little by little, the crew members started vanishing. So I think there was 4 of these guys boarded the ship. One of them picks up a pair of pants and decides to try them on. Well, all of a sudden, this big blob of green, snotty-looking stuff comes slithering down a wall and up his pants. Yeah, I know. I had the cell phone here. It was real fucking professional. I gotta light this thing up again. Well, then we'll get back to the fucking H-Man, because the H-Man was fucking cool. So anyway, that one guy gets that thing. The shit goes up his leg, and he starts to dissolve, melt down, whatever. The other 2 guys are trying to get out, and another one just drops on one of them like a bucket of sludge. And all of a sudden, he starts to melt down. So I think 2 or 1 of the original 4 got off the boat, and as they look at the freighter, there's these like ghastly apparitions in like green glowing, like standing on the deck, like looking. So whatever happened, this guy wound up, back in the Tokyo Bay, and so did the wreckage from this freighter. So the scientist rightfully assumes that the creatures are in Tokyo. So there's going to be a big police raid on the nightclub for the drugs. Uchida is trying to escape. He's in the dressing room of one of the performers. And that's another thing, too. There was like a pretty hot dance scene with, some sexy Japanese chicks that was cut for the U.S. release, as was part of this. So his underling is opening the window when all of a sudden this blob comes flying through the window and goes up his pants leg, and he starts fucking dissolving in a mess. Uchida sort of freaks out. He starts shooting the thing. Of course, nothing happens. The one stripper is cowering in the corner, and the thing starts crawling across the floor and gets to her, then shoots up her, and that's really fucking skeevy looking scene there. She starts to melt down. Then it goes under the door, allowing Uchida to take off his clothes, lay them out like he was dissolved, and run out the window. Of course, this is off camera. The cops start shooting at the creature, which basically gets up to like almost a humanoid thing. So, hey, if the bullets don't work, what's the next smart fucking thing to do? Hit it with your pistol, which the idiot does, and all of a sudden he gets covered with the shit. And this is like the real grotesque meltdown scene, because you actually see this guy coated with the stuff and then start to shrink up, and his clothes become a pile on the floor. Well, the cops know that the things are in the sewer, the scientists know that the things are in the sewer, and they figure out the only way to get rid of them, they have to burn them. So they start dumping gasoline in the sewer. Well, Uchida has grabbed Chikaro and forced her to go with him into the sewer. And to throw the cops off, he has her undress and throw her clothes in the water, which go floating out, so the scientist finds them and thinks the worst. But he's not dissuaded. He decides to go look for her. Well, Uchida finds his stash, but in finding his stash, the creatures are like slithering around in the sewers and drop on him and get him. And he dissolves, and Chikara is saved by the scientists, and they go out, and you see the creatures just like standing in the sea of flame, burning up. Now, Of course, radiation was the cause of this, and radiation was, huge, with Toho because, Godzilla, the atomic bomb blast, and all this. Like I said, the American version, for some reason, was just jerked around and trimmed up to be different. And I guess, it was, like I said, probably more aimed at kids. But it just got re-released on Mill Creek in a Blu-ray, and they also have the Toho version, which, if you don't mind subtitles, it sort of runs better, and it makes more sense. All right, it's fucking out. While that was going on, you had 58. Well, Italians were fucking busy back then because they came up with something called Kaltiki, the Immortal Monster. And I believe it was directed by Riccardo Freda, but I think I remember reading, and it looks this way, that he handed over the directorial reins to Mario Bava. And anybody familiar with Bava's work, you look at this film and you see the Bava influence on it with the shadows and the light and just the way it was set up. Now, Kaltiki it's sort of like set in Mexico, but shot in Italy, that type of thing. It's some kind of deity. It's this creature that lives at the bottom of this fucking lagoon or something. It's in a cave. These people are like archaeologists looking for the diggings and stuff. So the one guy went looking for that. Him and his buddy went looking, and they were attacked by something. The buddy comes back ranting and raving and is in complete shock. So there's a search party. They find a 16mm movie camera, develop the film, and which shows the guys going through there, this and that, and also shows that something's attacking, and you see the camera get dropped. So they figure this guy that is missing, his body's in the bottom of this lagoon. So a diver goes in, he goes down, but he finds a lot of bones, but a lot of gold. A lot of gold jewelry. This must have been like a sacrificial chamber for the goddess Kaltiki. So he comes up and he goes, we got to go down, we got to get more. Did you find so-and-so? No, but there's more gold. So he goes down, and all of a sudden something gets him, the rope goes taut. They pull him up, and he's in a frogman suit, but when they pull off the helmet, it's just a skull with eyes and shit oozing out of it. Then this fucking blob comes up out of the thing going after everybody. Now the bag of gold was dropped. One of the guys, Max, goes to grab it and falls, and his arm goes into the thing, and he's like up to his fucking shoulder in Kaltiki gooey. So the other scientist cuts it off. They take him out. But, okay, this thing is radioactive for some reason. And they bring Max back and they do surgery on him. This is like pretty grim and gross because they got his arm laid out on an operating table and they peel the thing off, and it's a skeletal arm, which they leave on him. Plus parts of his face are burned. So he's gone completely fucking insane and wants the scientist's wife, even though this housemaid is his girlfriend. So he escapes the hospital after killing a nurse with a knife. The piece of Kaltiki that they took off the arm is in some kind of container. Radiation awakens the thing. Well, the whole legend, the cut to the chase, is that Kaltiki is going to come back when this fucking comet shows up. So when the comet shows up, even though they basically have blown the original creature to shit in the cave so it can't get out, it activates the smaller parts that are in certain areas. Like the one in the hospital, it gets the night watchman, but they burn it, but there's one in the doctor's house, which gets out. Now, here is this blob crawling through this pretty much of a dollhouse, knocking over miniature furniture, which is pretty cheesy. But Max is in there and has been fed by his girlfriend, but Max, like I said, wants the doctor's wife and shit like that. So he makes an appearance and is just about to abscond with the doctor's wife and child when the creature bursts through the fucking doors. And Max falls into the creature. Of course, this is after he shoots his girlfriend for some fucking reason for interfering. But Max gets sucked in, and all of a sudden, Max's bloody skull gets pushed out. So now they run upstairs. The creatures are all over the place. The army's there. We got smaller tanks going here and there and everywhere. And eventually, the wife and child are saved, and Kaltiki's burned to bits. I'm not doing it justice. It's a pretty good fucking film despite its budget constraints, and it's heavy duty on the gore, for that era, 59. The only other Blob movie I could think of was The Creeping Unknown, where something goes up with an astronaut. Three of them, maybe three or four of them in there, but only one comes back, with these spores, which basically he starts eating everything in his path and turns out to be this huge fucking multi-tentacled fucking blob, and in Winchester Cathedral, I think it is. Another lost one, I think it was originally called the Quatermass Experiment, but for U.S. release, it's The Creeping Unknown. And of course, what I said before was they did a remake of The Blob, directed by Chuck Russell. And what they did was, in this version, of course, it's more explicit, more extreme, more people melting down and shit by being eaten by the damn thing. But it isn't like an alien invader this time. It turns out to be a bioweapon that we shot up there and mutated and came back. And again, the original Blob, they had to freeze it. And in this one, they freeze it too. So it's always been open for a sequel. Actually, there was a sequel for the original Blob called Beware the Blob or Son of the Blob, directed by Larry Hagman, who basically hired all his buddies, and they made a really shitty fucking sequel to the original Blob, Son of the Blob. I saw it as Son of the Blob on a double bill at a drive-in with something called 11 Harrow House. Weird combination, but they were both produced by Jack H. Harris, so that was his releasing things. But yeah, there's probably other Blob movies out there. I think X the Unknown was one, but Blobsploitation, sort of like one of those mini genres, sort of like two-headed monster genres or something. There wasn't a lot of them either. So today's January 5th. That's our episode, and we'll catch you on the flip side. So thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in, and above all, mask up and stay safe. We got to beat this fucking thing so we can actually go out and have some fucking fun for a change. See you on the flip side.